Hi, I'm Julian Hewitt, and I'm a human at JGF.
Ifikile imini enkulu. Welcome to the Humans of JGF, a JGF holiday special highlighting the brilliant minds behind our vision. And today we have our CEO, Julian Hewitt, with us. Hi, Julian. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, and you, Matabo?
Good, thank you. Fun fact, when we pitched this idea to have a holiday special to the team, Julian was like, at first I was like, faces of JGF. And Julian came in and was like, no, humans of JGF. So I find it kind of special to have you this here episode, since really the name, the heart of the name comes from you.
Thanks. Yes, Matabo. I mean, there have been a number of iterations of, of course, the most famous one is Humans of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good. It just kind of makes it personal, puts a face and a name behind the numbers. So, it's exciting to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. So where are you from?
So, interestingly enough, I was born in a little town called Kwekwe in Zimbabwe.
All right.
And that was, I guess, home for the first couple of years. And then after that, I found myself in what is now Gqeberha. And that really is, I guess, my home for many, many years. So I guess that would be me. I'm an Eastern Cape boy, but if you dig deep enough, you will see another country on my passport.
Lovely stuff. So, for people who do not know what your work entails, Julian, what does it mean to be a CEO at JGF?
That's a great question, Matabo. I sometimes think that I'm like an accidental CEO.
In what sense?
So I was very involved in the beginning in setting up the Jake Savile Fellowship. And at that stage, Allan Gray, who's obviously passed on now, was still around. And there was this request that he had made of the endowment to really say, look, how do we support the broader ecosystem that the Allan Gray Fellowship operates within? And so I did a lot of work into the education space. And one of the things that he was quite keen on is give me a good idea and give me someone good to be able to run it. And so I was very involved in coming up with the concept of Jake's Savile Fellowship, but I'd put another person forward.
Yeah.
And anyway, I guess it turned out that when we approached him, he was like, well, you're a couple of months too late. I've just accepted this other big opportunity. And thinking it through with maybe a little bit of reluctance, I said, well, I can do the job, or at least I think I can. And I guess that's where I find myself now, is on this podcast a few years later. Now, I do find, though, if someone says they want to be the CEO, my first question is why?
Yes.
It's not kind of obvious, because most people want to be the CEO. They want the title on your CV, I guess the power, the influence that comes with it. But I think there's a heaviness as well. The heaviness, especially in an organization that has come through startup phases to where we are today at Jake Savile Fellowship, means really like paying a lot of attention to making good quality decisions every day for years on end. And I don't often hopefully I get more of those right than wrong. But you've also got to understand that you will get them wrong. You are going to leave people disappointed. So there's always this kind of heaviness that comes from that, from kind of almost leading from the front.
So what then encouraged you to put your hand up, as you would put it, to put your hand up to undertake this job?
Yeah, so I guess the backstory is that Allan Gray himself was very keen on this idea of technology being the kind of silver bullet to really being the top education leapfrog the current reality in South Africa. Now, we know education does a huge injustice to the people of our country. But at that stage, his thinking was very much, technology can help us go above and beyond the quality of the teachers because of the content and devices and, wireless access and these massive online open source communities. So there was a sense in his mind that that's the way to go. And so that was very much what I was looking at, as to say, well, what is actually out there in the space of tech ed, and is actually that the solution, the opportunity that we want to invest money in? Now, this is back in the day for the endowment, which is now the philanthropy. And so eventually, after going through many iterations of meetings with people, there was this kind of like dawning that actually this is a lot more complex than it needs to be. And so eventually I remember sitting down in a hotel lobby. It was the Hatfield Hotel, at least the City Lodge in Hatfield. And then really saying, well, I actually think this is a complete black hole of any resources right now. But if we really want to make a difference, there was a quote that stood out for me by Andreas Schleicher from the OECD. And he said, look, no education system can exceed the quality of its teachers. And so that resonated very deeply with me. And then, the context is that I'd previously head up the Allan Gray Fellowship program. So I was, I guess, the program director. And what I did know was the scholarship space. What I did know is how to find and attract and select amazing people, and then to have a program to support them. And so my mind kept on coming back to the fact that, look, why don't we just take that thing that we know and do well already, and that I had some experience in, but instead of pointing it to finding these entrepreneurial leaders, can we not direct that to be a solution for the education landscape, for the expert teacher crisis in South Africa? And so it was kind of with that saying, look, I'm not an educator, I'm not a teacher, but I know this space, and that I can definitely leverage. So I guess that's kind of what led me to put my hand up, halfway at the start. And it's been an absolutely amazing learning journey ever since.
So when undertaking the task of being CEO, did you have a particular philosophical mandate that you lead with, or that you resolve that you're going to lead with when leading the organization?
Yes, it's a good point around the philosophy, and I think it's quite simple, to be honest. If you really want to drill down into any successful organization or any successful kind of movement, because in a way that's really what Jakes Havel Fellowship is all about. It literally comes down to the quality of the people that join you in this crusade, in this organization. And to be honest, I think that really starts with staff. Staff is such a key component. And if you don't get the right staff that are passionate and motivated to really join and contribute significantly, then you're also not going to do the beneficiaries justice, that you're also trying to really replicate that process. So I think very simply it's that. That's my philosophy. I think it's a very people-focused space that we're in. And you know yourself that Jakes Havel Fellowship has made a name for itself for attracting these high-achieving individuals. We're a little quirky in our own right. We've got a high level of responsibility. We're incredibly passionate about what we do. And so in a way, we create a great platform to, then bring our candidate fellows and our fellows in to say, well, look, this is who we are. We want you to be like us, and we want you to join us. And you kind of create almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that you start attracting these amazing people, both as staff and then, in our case, as our fellows.
Yeah. So we are a teaching fellowship. It is only right that we teleport ourselves back to our learning days when we were learners ourselves. So what is your earliest moment, or memory rather, of being at school?
Sure. My earliest memory of being at school, it's a great question. I can probably remember a few instances when I was in pre-primary school for sure. And I can remember one in particular where it was probably a singing lesson, and I still can't sing. And I remember that just being so hard because they wanted me to sing in a public space. But I think the schooling environment really shaped me. Yeah. When my parents moved from Zimbabwe to South Africa, my dad's job fell away immediately, and my parents literally had to start off from scratch as, essentially, working their way up as entrepreneurs, with nothing. But they did give myself and my sister a great opportunity to go to a good private school in the area. And I think that's really kind of set me up in terms of who I am and, the kind of role that education has played in my life. And of course, that's why we're here, right? We want to create those sorts of transforming opportunities for many more South Africans.
And what kind of learner were you?
Well, look, I think I definitely felt a little bit nerdy at one stage. I was always a strong candidate. I mean, the reality is academically, I was probably, the number one student right through right through primary school and into high school as well. Saying that, though, our school wasn't a particularly academically good school, and I didn't feel I was particularly clever, other than the fact that I was quite diligent and worked hard. But probably more importantly, I set goals for myself, and I think that really helped me academically. But I did play soccer and cricket, and I was, filling the usual kind of captain and those kinds of roles too. So I was definitely on the nerdy side, but I had enough sports to kind of keep me grounded with the rest of my friends.
Yeah. And who is your favorite teacher?
Who's my favorite teacher and why?
Yes, please. Please.
Sure. So, my favorite subject, and I guess there's often a correlation, right, was geography. And I really enjoyed that, which is kind of strange because I ended up doing a Bachelor of Commerce in Management Accounting for my sins afterwards. But my favorite subject was definitely geography. I kind of really enjoyed how tactile it was. You could learn about specific rock formations. And then my favorite teacher was a guy called Mr. Swart. And he was great at being able to take us outdoors and then take us on these excursions where we could have this wonderful sense of freedom and get to explore a textbook, but, in the kind of really amazing landscape that we have in South Africa. And he was a bit different in terms of the way he approached learning. So I enjoyed him for that, and it made quite a strong mark for me. The other thing that we sometimes don't ask ourselves is I had one teacher that pulled me aside once, and he happened to be the headmaster. And, I'd done quite badly in maths. And at that stage, I'd got a D in maths. And I thought, geez, I'm not very happy with that. And he was my maths teacher. And he just said to me, Julian, you can't be good at everything. Sometimes you should just accept maybe you're not good at maths, and maybe a D is something you should be comfortable with. And deep inside of me, I thought, no, that's not me, and I don't feel like I did my best. And so I really put a lot of work in to seeing how I could get much better at maths. Now, for me, that meant lots of past papers, extra tutoring, long hours in terms of how do I get from a D to what was ultimately two symbols up at the end of matric to a B. And so while he might not be my favorite teacher, he taught me a very valuable lesson, which is the power of being able to influence your own trajectory rather than just accepting what people think about you. And so he definitely influenced me more than my geography teacher did, even though I enjoyed geography as a subject.
So the ability to introspect and decide for yourself that, no, this is not who I am.
Yeah.
Where do you attribute this quality to?
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, these kinds of questions always come back to nature or nurture. So there's definitely an aspect in which coming to South Africa, my parents really started up buying a little corner cafe in a poor white suburb, and really just seeing how they were able to dig down and make the most of their circumstances, and do so with a strong level of focus and resilience. They're still entrepreneurs, but my sister and I are infinitely better off because of their effort. So I think there was something quite powerful in seeing how that was the context that I grew up in, and seeing how that had evolved, over the sort of 18 years into high school. But here's another interesting thing that stood out for me. So what I learned from that maths teacher, and then saying, no, I know I'm better than this, was, yes, it's great to have goals and achieve them. But then the next question was, well, how do you know that these are the right goals? Because maybe you set goals and you achieve them, but they take in the wrong direction. And that started getting me into the next space, which I feel was really crucial for, even where I am right now, which is, what is that vision? How do you craft goals that speak to a bigger vision? Because otherwise, what's the point? So yes, it was nice that I got a better mark in maths, but to what point, to what end? And so that for me was, yes, I got a lot from my parents around resilience, focus, goal setting. But then the next question is, what's the purpose? What's the why behind that?
Yeah. So now we are meeting Julian in Standard 10 at the time, I would assume.
Yes,
it was called.
That's correct.
What was in the stars for you post Standard 10? What did you imagine for yourself?
So I think I was really obnoxious in our matric book. You have the chance to put a little quote next to your photo. And I kind of laugh at how arrogant I was in those stages, because it wasn't really me, but I had this little quote that said, "The world never changed Julian. Julian changed the world."
Ooh. Okay.
I was like, oh, why do I even say that? So, the one thing that really helped me is I did have quite a sheltered schooling environment, I won't lie, and quite a diverse one as well. So, I mean, one of the things that was great is our school was fully multiracial in the 50s. I think it was only the second school in South Africa to literally be fully multiracial. So, obviously, that kind of gave me a level of grounding, I think, that I hopefully still carry with me today. And then I took a gap year. That was also quite seminal for me. So, I went from being quite sheltered to then literally going and working as a sports coach in quite a fancy school in Oxford for the year. I was completely on my own, doing something that I had really no kind of anchoring for in terms of an experience, but it really helped me gain a strong sense of independence. And I think that was kind of crucial to, furthering my journey. Now, as to like what was twinkling at the stars at that stage, I don't think many matric students really have a good sense of it. And hopefully, people at any age are still wondering where they're going to from there.
Yeah. So for you to be where you are today, our CEO, us having this conversation, there have been many faces and phases of Julian. Can we just take a quick deep dive as to how these phases and faces of Julian significantly contribute to the person we have the opportunity to work with?
Thanks, Matabo. Another good question. So I think in terms of phases, yes, I have in a way lived, and I kind of feel like quite a few lives. Sometimes I really do kind of sense that, and there's obviously kind of a value in that. What always has been constant, though, in the golden thread through all these experiences is this vision that I spoke to you about. And it was so strong that I think in my first or second year at university, I literally designed my own diary, had it printed and bound so that I could bring in my goal, my purpose, my 3-year plan, and really think quite carefully through these. And so what that kind of gave me strong insight into was a couple of things. The first was I was always from quite a young age quite passionate around social entrepreneurship. And for me, I would understand that as a way of being able to essentially look at how you can apply an entrepreneurial mindset to unlocking or being more innovative in a sector where you can really have impact. And that really has been consistent. And in that, I've had the privilege of working for, close on 13, 14 years within the broader Allan philanthropic environment. And they focus very much on entrepreneurship and education. And so my initial foray was into the space of entrepreneurship, and I have had quite a lot of engagement in that environment. But the more you dig, the more you realize that, yes, entrepreneurship is a great button to push to help transform South Africa more broadly. But the reality is if you don't have a good quality education system, you're just not going to be able to capacitate learners with an entrepreneurial mindset, with the sense of like foundation that they can build on. And so it all started coming back to education for me from a schooling perspective. And so that's kind of the golden thread in terms of the phases that I've gone through. So if you kind of compartmentalize how that's looked in terms of, the different stages, it has felt a little varied, to be honest. I've also had the chance to travel a lot. And I think that, again, that gives perspective on things too. So within this kind of environment, I have had the chance to go overseas a number of times. So, of course, I was in the UK for 12 months. I was on a Clinton Democracy Fellowship for 3 months based out of Tufts University in the US. I was on a Chinese government scholarship in Shanghai, learning to speak Mandarin and understanding a little bit more about the Chinese environment for almost 3 years. And, travel quite extensively professionally and personally in between as well. So those are the kind of main aspects of it. Now, in that journey, I have been involved in setting up a number of social enterprises, of course, Jake's Havel Fellowship being one of them, or even in organizations like Allan Orbis Foundation. I was quite involved in setting up what's now what's the Circle of Excellence. That's a platform that's still in existence today. The other initiative was the Jamboree as well. That's also been around for more than a decade. Even back when I was a student, I'd started Brightest Young Minds. And it was really quite exciting to see one of our fellows that is now and was recently just accepted into Brightest Young Minds. So it was a little surreal. And one of, I guess, the things that also supported that was I started the Center for Social Enterprise at least social entrepreneurship at Gibbs too. So there's always that kind of curiosity around what are the ways in which you can influence the system, but they all still come back to education and entrepreneurship within not just South Africa as a country, but like how do we profile what we're doing internationally? And I think we really need to showcase that more.
Sure. Now, you're part of the founding members of JGF, and yours with a particular flavor of really setting up what we understand as this fellowship. And by Mr. Gray, you were given the opportunity to outsource the lead who you ended up being. Tell us how this journey at JGF for you began.
Thanks, Matabo. So I used to be the selection manager at Allan Orbis Foundation. And as part of that, I mentioned how I'd set up the Circle of Excellence, which was their top 100 schools, at least feeder schools into this entrepreneurial fellowship program. And in that space, engaging with these school principals, there was a very regular commentary coming back to say, we love what you're doing entrepreneurially, but if you're not investing in education, which is really teaching on the brink right now, you're essentially not going to be able to find these amazing people in the future. And so one of the early initiatives as selection manager was at a board meeting to say, well, why don't, as one of the intake streams, we bring teachers into this Allan Gray Fellowship? And so that was in the board pack. Allan Gray was at that meeting. Normally he recuses himself so that everyone doesn't say, yes, that's a great idea and just follow his lead. But he said no. Very much we're not about teachers. That's a vocation in its own right. And so that didn't go ahead. And so I guess that was kind of the initial side in which teaching came out. And this is probably going back to about 2012, even earlier. So this is a long time. And then after I'd left the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation, that's when I came on as this consultant looking into these opportunities. And it was again at a Circle of Excellence event where after we'd done all this research, we said, okay, sure, let's now give the board what they wanted back. Actually, I've just come from a board meeting now with some of the same people like Trevor Manuel and Professor Njabula Ndebele and Anthony Farr. And we said, but how about we look at creating this opportunity that mirrors on what we know as the Allan Gray Fellowship, but, really looks at a long-term pipeline of teaching excellence and teaching leadership. So that's really where it happened again. And that was 2016 now. And we brought all of these trustees to the Royal Bafokeng Nation, to Lebone II College, to really signify in a real way what excellence looks like and also engage with, very influential school principals at that stage. So at that initiative really was the birthplace of not only Jakes Havell Fellowship, but Funda Wanda as well. And then probably a year later is where Jakes Havell Fellowship officially got constituted, and a little small team of us then got spurred into action.
Sure. And the name Jakes Havell Fellowship, why this name? Why this legacy?
Okay. So Jakes Havell Fellowship, first of all, was the inaugural chairperson of the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation. So there is that link to the role that he played at that stage. And I would have had the privilege of obviously then reporting to him through our sort of various board meetings. But if you go back, Jakes Havell Fellowship, at least Jakes Havell, was initially from the Eastern Cape, and then became a school teacher in Somerset East. I smile actually because quite recently Jonathan Jansen, our chairperson of the board, talks about what good can come out of Komadacha.
Yes.
And every time I drive down to my parents, I always pass Komadacha, and it reminds me, wow, this is Jakes Havell and the legacy. So, of course, he was this school teacher. And then I think the leadership that he showed it gave him the opportunity to explore platforms of high impact, which ultimately ended up in him taking on the VC role at UWC. And that really was the bastion of, driving this anti-apartheid message and saying, no, we will not accept secondary education. But what was interesting about him is he had a very humble voice. So there was quite a humble but discerning leadership and value system that he left in place. So I think between us saying, look, we want to find people that can be these education leaders. Yes, some of them will be amazing and stay in a classroom environment, but some of them will also have significant impact in the broader educational landscape, like Professor Jakes Havel. It was a real privilege to be able to merge who he was as a person, his role on the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation as their founding chair, and then also obviously as a school teacher himself.
Yeah. So you are our CEO, and obviously part of the work that you do is just to be the guiding light to the intention of the organization. How has it been for you to work in a legacy organization, having to balance the intentions of Mr. Allan Gray and Prof. Jakes Havel? How has it been for you to find that sweet spot of balancing such prolific legacies?
Thanks, Matabo. Look, in a way, I'm kind of happy that we weren't called the Allan and Jill Gray Teaching Initiative, at least not like as our website name was openly, because I think definitely it comes with it's I wouldn't say its own baggage, but you've got to be very cautious about the kind of role that you can play, especially when you want to be more challenging of a system you don't feel is just and right. And then if you're linked at that level, it does become a little bit awkward. That's true. So I do appreciate the fact that we are named after somebody that I think is underrepresented in South African history. And so it gives us the chance to obviously contribute a bit more to a legacy that really was strong, but isn't really as publicly known as possible. So in that journey, we've had the wonderful opportunity to engage and, go and have breakfast with his wife, Phoebe. We've had Hein Havel along at our first number of selection camps and been quite involved in that too. So I think that's been quite exciting to just get to know a little bit more about the person and make it a bit more personal, but not have to live into like a very specific legacy that you'll be quite strongly scrutinized for. So I think that spaciousness has been quite helpful. Otherwise, you end up in a space where the kinds of things that you do have to be very well moderated and thought through. Otherwise, there's a complication that can obviously easily come through if that's not the case. And I think the nature of what we're trying to do is, over time, be a strong voice, even if it isn't necessarily the popular voice with institutions at the time. So we need to balance that ourselves. So I think it's a little early to kind of really answer the question of like what's our legacy contribution, especially in honoring these legacies, because the reality is we're so early on in the game. It is always kind of intriguing to me because both of these individuals are very humble and unassuming. So Mr. Allan Gray was very much behind the scenes. He didn't like media. He never felt a call to be pushing on the sales. He wanted the results to speak for themselves. And in a way, it's a little bit about where we're at right now. We've been quite under the radar. And Jakes Havel, in a way, I think Prof, he would have felt quite uncomfortable about having a fellowship named after him. But in speaking to his son recently, his son was like, sure, my dad, yes, he would have been quite, found it quite difficult to a man of very low ego requirements to have a fellowship named after him. But I think he'd be very proud about, what he'd see right now if he was still around.
Yeah. So you often say, Julian, in my conversations with you, you say that the work that we do in the organization, it is your responsibility, and I quote you, it's your responsibility to find where your passion as an individual meets what is required of us to take the work forward. And I'm going to reflect that question back to you. What about the work that you do as CEO really intersects with the ethics and the principles and the passions that you live by?
Thanks, Matabo. I think there's two things, and you spoke a little bit about a philosophy here. And so maybe these are the two things to reflect on my side. The one is we work within a system that is entrenched a certain status quo, and there's a certain context behind that. So I think it's very important that we and I get to grips with what does that mean? What is that system in play? Because obviously we're trying to be, in the business of change. So there's a reflection on why is it that we don't have a schooling system that's doing justice to the potential of our learners. And so that's a question that's always on my mind. So I like the opportunity to engage around that question with various organizations, people, entities, etc. The other side of it is to just make things very personal. And I think the personal touch is probably something that's very underrated. But I had the chance to meet one of our fellows at a school last week in a classroom, and it was just so special. I loved that. And so, the paradox in a lot of leadership roles is the higher up you move, the more disconnected you get with the people that almost inspired you in the first place and really kept that flame of why you're doing what you're doing alive. And so I don't want to lose that personal touch. And I don't want to lose that kind of connection. Any organization's got some level of hierarchy, and I get it. And of course ours as well. But I love the fact that I can go into the classroom. I would love to do much more of that. And that was a reflection out of that visit next year, is to really just go in and say, okay, what's going on there? And so there's a sense of really making sure that you understand both of those. What's the system at play and how do you make it personal? And you've also probably heard is one of my other commitments is I'm starting my PGCE next year. And so there's a number of reasons for that. I'm going to do it part-time, obviously, so I can still work. I've still got responsibilities. But I felt like I wanted to understand what's going on in the classroom rather than just, being removed from that environment. Particularly, I'm passionate about going into an environment like Mamelodi, doing my teaching prac there, and really getting to see where's the intention of a school like that. Because I'm sure there are a lot of principals and school teachers that really want to do more in their schooling environment. And I want to understand that, because for me it's too far removed as a concept right now. And so I'd love to kind of sometimes cut through the kind of role that I obviously play as well, but just get through to why we're doing what we're doing. And so that opportunity gives me the chance to be on the front lines. And that's what I like, as much as it's also helpful to think through where we're going, what's our strategy. It's about me making it personal too.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Julian is very much a person who leads with a kind of communal embeddedness in the way in which he does things. And as a result, he has earned himself, I will say, the name Tandabantu. Not sure if it's Umzwandile or Samora, one of the two. I gave you the name Tandabantu. And to circle back around this name of loving people and being intentional about preserving relationships, healthy relationships with those you interact with, Julian, who modeled or who models this leadership quality that is people-centered for you well?
Sure. You're asking lots of really good questions. So the Tandabantu name actually came when I was catching a taxi in Cape Town. I think I was probably on main road in Sea Point. And I got in the front. We have to start counting the money. And, you know what I'm saying, right?
Do not, I'm triggered. I'm triggered.
And the taxi driver, we ended up chatting, and it turned out that we were both from Gqeberha, Port Elizabeth in those days. And he asked me, so what's your name? And I said, no, my name's Julian. He's like, no, what's your real name? I'm like, it's Julian. It's a mighty would say. He's like, no, I'm going to call you Tandabantu.
Oh, goodness.
And I love that name. And so it's kind of stuck with me ever since. And I'm not the typical CEO, I don't think. I think a lot of people in these kinds of roles are often there for a lot of other reasons. And so it's an interesting question I often reflect on. You talk about this idea of leadership, and it's a good question. Who actually are the kinds of leaders that I would often aspire to be like? And I'm not sure, a ready answer comes to mind, because if, I'm not that typical kind of person. At an early stage of my career post-university, Anthony Farr was my mentor. I mean, there's certain things I really liked about him, but I don't necessarily say that it was just him that really felt that connection. But, you know, we live in a tired world right now.
Yes.
And something that just gives me joy is to see a smile on someone's face. And especially where you're not expected to, have that kind of engagement. When you're going and paying for something at a shop, it's so transactional. But there's nothing more special to me than to look somebody in the eye, say their name, and really mean it, and just feel that kind of joy of life coming back when, it could easily be a transaction and you wouldn't have gone any further than just giving a credit card or some cash. So I'm not sure. You'll have to help me think about that. But, I mean, I think in our own team, we're very, very good at that. And so from that perspective, it's not a Julian trait, it's a JGF trait. We're very empathetic. I think that's really important in any organization. I think we're a very caring organization. We say that too, and I think there's a genuineness in this. We realize that we are people, and we come with our own issues and families and baggage and cars that don't work and dentist appointments and kids that get sick. And maybe, this was an opportunity to create the kind of organization we want to work in.
Yeah.
And we speak about creating a flourishing work environment. So I think it's almost just the sense of being able to say, well, what kind of organization would I like to be part of?
Yeah.
And that's really become a culture. And it's not just because of me, of course. I think a culture becomes something because people resonate with it, they contribute to it, and then it just becomes the done thing. So maybe JGF would be the example in that regard.
So at the beginning of the year, Julian, I recall, I think in our initial meetings of 2022, you committing to interacting with candidate fellows more, which is a thing you've already done in 2021, but you just wanted to up the stakes, right?
Yes.
Very much Julian's 10x thinking.
Yes.
Just do more than what we did.
Yes.
And I haven't heard you reflect on your experience of calling candidate fellows. I'd randomly have a candidate fellow send me a picture of you with them on campus. Please, I know I'm putting you on blast here
No,
on a
you
podcast.
You are.
But please do reflect to us how your experience of, the random calls,
Yes.
the random check-ins
Yes.
with our candidate fellows.
Yeah. So, look, there's something that comes with having walked with people for a number of years. And, obviously they reach out to you reach out to them. And I think that's been quite special. I've really enjoyed that. And then I definitely remember my commitment. It wasn't as public, Matab was until you made it now.
Putting you on blast.
So, look, if I'm honest with you, I started phoning and I started calling, and I think I got as far as about the letter F. And it was kind of fun because people were like, whoa, why is the CEO phoning me? There's a sense of like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
You got to reassure them around just, that you just got their best interests at heart. But I also won't lie, it's been a tough year.
Yeah.
And so, we all go through those times where you realize that you've also got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. And I think I've had to pull back on a couple of things I would have really loved to do more of. And so that's definitely a strong commitment. I think it will mean even more for me to go into the schooling environment of our candidate fellows rather than to just pick up the phone and have that engagement. I think both are really important. This is always the thing that I just don't like about the level of responsibility that you have on your shoulders. Right now I've got, all of these really important things that I need to do. And then, engaging with the candidate fellows, which of course should almost seem like my first priority, ends up being that really important thing that's not urgent.
Yeah.
And then other things take the back burner. So I'm getting there.
Yes.
So at least you're still keeping me accountable. I've done some of it.
Yes, and how has it been though?
What?
Interacting with them. What kind of essence do you get from our candidate fellows when you are with them?
Look, I think it's it's very inspiring, and that's why I like doing it. And I like the fact that, again, we're still a small enough organization that we can just pick up the phone and still engage, with our candidates. Now, as soon as the organization gets so big and there's so many people around and you just don't know their names, then it does become a lot more tricky. But I've really just loved the opportunity to have conversations with them around things that they feel are important or they want to chat about, or sometimes just say hi. But I love how they are so passionate about such different things, and that's important. There's no cookie cutter there whatsoever, and that kind of energy really feeds on me. Now, I'm sure, as you know, it's so great to be able to do this in-person events and in-person dialogues and conversations rather than just, over Zoom or, in a more kind of distant and remote format. So they really feed me in terms of their energy and their passion, and make me kind of want to be a better person, a better CEO. And so I've got a lot from those conversations.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, I like to have my finger on the pulse. What's going down, And I think that's also crucial for anyone in any sort of leadership perspective, is to really get a sense. Sometimes maybe they're unhappy, or their allowance didn't get paid on time, or that's fine. That's also part of knowing, like, how can you support them better. But sometimes they just want to say thank you so much. This means a lot, and I love those moments too.
Yeah. So a good 5 years back, or even a little before then, JGF was an idea, and yourself, Mpho, Carla, Jeremy got together, and I can imagine the kinds of robust strategies and planning that went into, crystallizing what we understand today. And I would imagine sayings such as, when we have a team, when the team grows, and now we're 5 years in, and as Carla says, we have grown 5 times over than what you were 5 years ago. What surprises you the most about this organization that you never anticipated before?
Look, I think the first thing to just say is that founding team are still here. And that in itself is a bit of a surprise. And so I think it's a pleasant surprise to just see how we can bring these people together at such an early stage. And 5 years into the game, we're still there. I think that in itself is very much very noteworthy. I think it surprises me to also just appreciate how agile our organization can be. It's one thing to start an organization when it's small. And of course, then it's quite easy. You can quickly make decisions. Everyone's a generalist. And as you'll know, we're starting to hire a lot more people with specialists in their titles now. So we've kind of reached a very different stage of our organization. I've really, really appreciated the fact that we are able to be adaptive to our environment, and being, maybe it's a little bit of a pivot to where we've come from and where we're going, although there's always been a level of intentionality there, so I don't think we're completely getting out of it. But I've just been surprised at how incredibly amazing our team is. And just how, obviously, there's a certain level of responsibility that I feel, but I love the fact that other people take that up. I love the fact that someone who recently got injured is getting flowers, and I love the fact that somebody who was concerned about whether she could breastfeed her baby daughter at a conference of ours can ask for help and assistance, and I love the fact that people take this on. That for me is really special. I love the agency that people have, and I think that's quite surprising, because you get to an organizational stage in which people have a better sense of what they're doing and why they do it. But I love the fact that people still have this real sense of agency. I wouldn't have imagined that, when we started all those years ago, because now we're 20 people, right? As you said, 5-fold. So I love the fact that people themselves are taking ownership. I mean, our values, people talk about them often. We talked about the flourishing work environment. We talk about skating to where the puck's going to be. We talk about spending money like it's your own. I love. That surprised me too. Values, I always thought were, you write them up in your annual report and that's the last time you see it. To kind of have that level of guidance in the organization has been great. So surprised? Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's a new journey for me, right? I haven't been a CEO before, so I don't have much to compare it to.
Yeah.
So there is that reality too. But there's definitely been quite a few things that I've loved what we've done and how they're now just part of our organization.
Yeah. I feel compelled, and this is not even a thing that has been planned for it to be a speaking point this afternoon, but I feel compelled to ask you, Julian, about the philosophies or the principles that have guided you as an individual, apart from your work. but as a person, Julian, the person, the father, the friend, the husband, the colleague, the overarching principles that almost define the way in which you take your next step every day.
Well, we've got 2 daughters. Julia is 13, just about to go into high school, and Jessica's 11. And one of the things that I want more than anything for them is to be independent and curious. So I think that kind of sparks me often, that independence and curiosity as really crucial. Like, yes, if they get nice academics, I'm happy. If they do well in sport, that's great. But actually, like, I'm really keen on that. So I think those 2 aspects have been kind of quite foundational. So I'm very curious myself. So I'll give you an example. Today's Monday. Yesterday, we took out honey from our own beehives.
Yes, delicious honey, yes. I might add. I got a little parcel last year.
It might or might not be coming your way soon, Matabo.
Ooh, excited.
So there's this curiosity that comes out in a lot of different spaces. I brew my own beer, which I did yesterday.
Nice.
And then I also got really interested about making coffee from scratch. So I have coffee bushes at home, and I actually roast my own coffee. So there's a curiosity about understanding things right from scratch. And I love that. And so I think that comes through in a lot of different contexts. I'm quite a mindful, reflective person as well. So I really appreciate the opportunity to reflect. I had a wonderful mini sabbatical a couple of weeks ago, just in nature, just with me, next to a running stream, camping, off-grid, with a journal and a couple of poetry books. So I love that too. And I think, that's definitely something that hopefully adds a little bit to my calm demeanor that sometimes people say I have. Although sometimes I feel like, wow, I'm also just trying to hang in there like the rest of us. So I think that would definitely contribute to my philosophy. And so we again often ask the questions of why, and in JGF we often say why not, and I like that too. So we've got to challenge things. We need to make sure that we challenge ourselves as well. We need to challenge what we're doing as an organization. We need to make sure that what we're doing as an organization is challenging. So I think that why not question is good. So there's a childlike curiosity, I think, that does come up. But I do have a thirst for learning. I've done my master's now while studying in strategy. That was a big thing for me. Don't recommend it to anybody. Doing that while studying, wow, that was hard work. And so there really is this question of kind of pushing myself. I love journaling. My wife actually took me to task this morning on the way to work to say, you don't do enough of that. Reading those kind of self-help books and really internalizing them. And so I don't want to get too jaded about life. I think sometimes it's easier to do that. So yes, I'm a lifelong learner. I love throwing myself in new countries and cultures because it gets me to reflect and it gets me to be in the moment. So maybe if you sum all of this up, it's that sense of presence that I wish I could cultivate more, but I do try and cultivate where I can. And this is one of those moments, Matabo.
Okay, lovely stuff, Julian, lovely stuff. Now, I would imagine as a CEO, the board plays an incredible part in being your support system as a CEO, of course, in the organization at large, but I can imagine the kinds of backings and wisdoms and guiding pathways that the board could provide for you. What has also surprised you about the nature, the composition of our board, the leadership that they provide, and the kind of support that they provide you?
Yeah, that's a good question too, Matabo. Thank you. So I think I had the privilege of really saying, like, if we could have a board, who would I want on it and why? And so the board we have now is largely as a result of me putting on a bit of an arranger hat and saying I'd love this kind of person and that kind of person. Now, most boards have a very strong aspect of almost the type of professional skill sets to guide an organization around governance in particular and strategy also. So you'd have a board member responsible for legal issues, for finance issues, for HR issues. Now, one of the great things about being part of Jake's Havel Fellowship is we have that as shared service through the broader Allan and Joel Gray philanthropies. So it is straight away means that the composition of our board can be a lot more around a think tank from that perspective rather than, in a way, risk mitigation, which is quite a big part of any board. And so I've learned a lot from our chairperson. That's Professor Jonathan Jansen. He's got a lot of discernment and wisdom there. But he's also quite clear to say, like, look, we will guide you around strategic issues and give you good points to make, but you're the management and you need to manage. So sort that out yourselves and then come to me. And so I think I've been really, it's been an incredibly helpful environment. I've been very surprised by how supportive our board members are. Often they'll go way beyond the call of duty. I was catching up with a board member watching a soccer game over supper not so long ago. There's a few board members that you send a WhatsApp to and they'll respond immediately. Even Professor Jonathan Jansen, I don't know how he does it, but I'll send him the minutes or send him like, I'd love to meet and chat with you. And he's there, so that accessibility has also been amazing because these are obviously highly respected personas in the space. But I've really, really enjoyed having different perspectives. And one of the things that I've also appreciated from this experience is not to surround yourself with people that have the same idea that you do or the same thinking. So there's some board members that will really challenge us. And sometimes it's easy to not want to be challenged. But I really think that's helpful because it ties into your blind spots. And sometimes you'd prefer to let everyone say you're doing a great job and get on with it. But there's a lot of value in having board members that can call you out and say, no, I don't agree with what you're doing. So it's a dance, A board member isn't, or a board isn't this perfect organization, neither are you. So you're trying to find that rhythm between how do you get them to support you best? How do you get them to give you the spaciousness to do what you're best at? But how do you also, use them for that level of wisdom and discernment? And having very different perspectives is really, really helpful in that journey.
Yeah. 5 years in, unyaka wokumila. 180 candidate fellows, 40 of which are newly qualified teachers. Julian, what about our candidate fellows gives you the kind of assurance that South African classrooms are in safe hands?
Yeah, thanks, Matabo. So, we've got a very rigorous selection process. And I would, fairly confidently say that it's one of the hardest scholarships to get into in South Africa. It's incredibly rigorous. And so often you think, like, is this level of rigor necessary? Now, when you actually look at our candidate fellows who have graduated and are in the classroom right now, wow, they are absolutely astounding in terms of where they're at, what they're doing, how quick they're doing it. And it's been so reassuring to see vision in action. So to see this direct correlation between these amazing people we spend hours finalizing selection decisions around to them actually being in the classroom and having the kind of impact that you really hoping would happen. And so there's something so satisfying about seeing that like we do right now. And we've also just had our first external monitoring and evaluation reports into our newly qualified teachers. And the feedback from them is, you guys are doing something incredibly amazing. Keep at it, because this is mission aligned. And that is satisfying for me, is to just see how we've got that why not question now. Why not teaching? And you start to play around with when people see this caliber of individual in the classroom, they say, well, why not me then? And I like that. I like the fact that we are starting to be out there and recognized by various government institutions and organizations. And we're newbies in this journey, if we're honest, right? I mean, yes, we've got 40 newly qualified teachers, but it's our first 40. And they've just finished their first year. But we can see echoing into the future their brilliance. And that is exciting for me because that starts changing the narrative. And that's really what Jake Sewell Fellowship's all about.
Yeah. And we have a teacher coach who goes by the name of Rudy Machi. What is your fondest memory of Rudy? Because they will be interviewed next after you.
Okay, great.
When you hear the name Rudy Machi,
yes,
what comes to mind and what experience do you have of them?
So, Matabo, the very first time I met Rudy was when he was with another organization and they were hosting an evening event at a school not too far from where we are right now. And Rudy was supporting as a car guard, as a parking attendant. And he had the biggest smile on his face. And it struck me, why is this guy so happy, And I was running a little bit late at that stage, and traffic was heavy, and I was feeling probably a little bit grumpier than I should have been. And that stuck with me. Again, that's the little thing sometimes, that the little things that you can do. And I've loved that level of joy that Rudy can bring to himself and to an organization like ours. And I love the fact that kind of childlike joy again, right? You know what I'm talking about? We'll have a morning meeting, and Rudy will have this massive smile on his face and say, "Happy Tuesday, Happy Friday, or Slay Day," and it just makes you smile and laugh with him. And of course, he does that in spite of sometimes having tough times, like we all do, right? And that's what I love about it, that he is still able to really shine for us and for himself, and bring that real sort of joy to us too. So, he's a special. They're a special person.
Yes.
Let's get that right. And they joined us as an assessor. And that means that Rudy has a very good understanding of JGF and the kinds of people we're looking for. And I love that journey that they have experienced with us, not just coming through to an interview for the first time, but to say, this is like my dream employer. I would really absolutely love to work with them. And I've been very excited that we were able to find a home for him this year.
Lovely
for
stuff.
them this year. Thanks,
Yes.
Matabo.
Yes. So, be a teacher. That's a mantra for our organization. And there's someone who's listening, Julian, who has this amber within, wanting to be a practitioner within the education space, and they don't know how. They are bogged down by, despondencies and this, that, and the third. What advice would you give such an individual to fan that flame, for them to be a teacher?
Thanks, Matabo. Look, it's fascinating to see how much interest we've had in our program. And, we had over 20,000 people want to see were they eligible to be part of the Jack Scavell Fellowship this year. And that's phenomenal. We've surpassed our wildest dreams. And even the universities we partner with their postgraduate certificate in education, they've been really swamped by this. So there's something interesting happening here. So don't feel like you're swimming against the tide. Maybe you're swimming towards something. And I feel very, very strongly that the classroom is a vehicle for change. So on the one side, if you're listening to this and saying, well, is it for me or not? Well, it's a very purpose-driven organization, at least profession, being a teacher. And so you get a real chance to engage with real people on a daily basis and really, impact on their lives. And, teachers will influence over 3,000 students over their professional career. So there's something special about that. But in a country like South Africa, it really is a question much deeper around inequality and addressing that. So as we go through, what does schooling look like in a country like ours? What's the context that should make it as accessible and accommodating to our country and our contexts? And, the difficult background we had, there's so much opportunity to bring yourself into playing a special role in this environment. So there's something where it is a purpose-driven profession. But on the other side, there is a real strong sense internationally that the way we understand education has to change. It was very much a mechanistic or factory floor type model, production line, come in on one side in grade R, leave in grade 12 with, certain processes or skills and knowledge. But we know the world's changed since then. And so there's something very exciting about being on the tipping point of what is education looking like in the broader sense of the word. And of course, this is where technology comes in. This is where globalization comes in. This is where new subjects come in. This is where mindsets come in, rather than just thinking through, what is in your textbook and how do you kind of replicate that in an exam. So there's a real sense of excitement around that. What I would say to you is it's hard. We know that teaching in classrooms in South Africa isn't easy. We know that there are a lot of exposed schools that are very vulnerable to the tough socioeconomic communities that surround their schooling environment, and that gets reflected in the learners and the community and the parents as well. So it's not easy. I think you need to go in with a sense of resilience as well. Otherwise, you're going to get quite disillusioned. Now, in this, of course, it's really helpful to be part of something bigger than just yourself. A professional community, a fellowship like Jack Scavell, where people have a strong sense of values in the kinds of change that they want to bring and kind of support you, when you're going through tougher times and help you kind of get ahead faster and go further. So, of course, if you want to go fast, go on your own. If you're in it for the long run and you want to go far, then find your community. So if you're listening to this, we'd love you to think about Jake's Havel Fellowship as your community. But even if you're not part of our community, I think there's a real opportunity to find a sense of meaning and depth in the teaching profession. I'm going to put my hand up, as I've said already.
Yes.
I might hopefully be someone's accounting and economics and business studies teacher in the future. And that's my commitment, and I hope that you will join me on this journey too.
In the spirit of this being a holiday special, Julian, what word of encouragement do you give to South Africans today, considering the year that we've had, considering the last 5 years, in fact, that we've had as a country? What words of encouragement do you want to share with them over this holiday season?
So first of all, be kind to yourself, because it is the opportunity for you to take time off, and let's do that. I think it's really good to just tune out for a little bit. You deserve it for yourself, and you owe it to yourself. So we know that it's tough mentally out there in the work environment, in the home environment, in the country environment. So be kind to yourself. I love the fact that we have the chance to end a year and to start a new one. So really think about how you want to show up in the best possible way next year. If there are things that you feel like you could have done better at, should have done less of, habits that you want to start or stop, give yourself the opportunity to do that and maybe be more intentional than just putting a few New Year's resolutions together. Think really carefully about what that contribution is. And then the reality is we live in a difficult country. It can really seem overwhelming, especially if you're connected and mainlining on social media and the news, and it feels very disempowering. And so the reality is we need to all do what we can do to the best of our abilities. And South Africans are really good at that. And we face much tougher situations than we have right now. But there's a sense of purpose and meaning in the contributions we can make in the workspace. So don't kind of overlook that and just feel like this is too much for me. Find the little things that you can do that can bring happiness and joy to the world, and that will repay itself to you manyfold over.
The world did not change Tandabantu. Tandabantu changed the world. We may unpack how you may find this philosophically questionable, but I dare say the audaciousness of that statement written by matriculant Julian Hewitt is the thing that carries in your spirit still. The ability to say, this is going to happen. This 10x mentality that has led us, even in the most shakiest of times where we even doubt ourselves. Thank you so much, Julian, for the fact that would I call myself a normal podcaster? I don't know what I call myself. But for me to be able to sit with you in this way is incredible, which is the thing I told Jeremy. Which organization gives people the opportunity to interact across hierarchies on an average day, and it being the normative and nothing extraordinary? Thank you so much for giving or showing faith in all of us. I often tell Utuli, our producer, that we are left in our little laboratory and these people don't know what we're doing, but they trust that we're doing what we're supposed to do. And you have really shown faith and backed a lot of us in the work that we do. And we thank you so much for the work that you do and the impact that it has on us as people and humans at JGF.
Thanks, Matavo.
You want to know more about Jake's Havel Fellowship? Go to your favorite search engine, type in Jake's Havel Fellowship. You will find a beautifully furnished website there detailing how you can partner with what I dare call a movement, and my CEO backs this. You then find ways in which you can contact us via our social media. We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram. Jake's Havel Fellowship. I am Matabo Tladi, and I'll see you on the other side of this. Bye.